The Nameless City. When I drew nigh the Nameless City, I knew it was a curse. I was traveling in a parched and terrible valley under the moon, and afar I saw protruding uncanny above the sands as parts of a corpse may protrude from an ill-made grave. Fear spoke from the age-worn stones of this hoary survivor of the deluge. This great-grandmother of the eldest pyramid and of valueless aura propelled me and bade me retreat from antique and sinister secrets that no man should see, and no man else had ever dared to see. Remote in the desert of Araby lies the Nameless City, crumbling and inarticulate, its low walls hidden by the sands of uncounted ages. It must have been thus before the first stones of Memphis were laid, and while the bricks of Babylon were yet unbaked. There is no legend so old as to give it a name or to recall that it was ever alive, but it's told of in whispers around campfires and muttered about by grandmas in the tents of chiefs, so that all the tribes shun it, without wholly knowing why. It was the first place that Abdul Alazar, the mad poet, dreamed on the night before he sang his unexplainable couplet, that is not dead which can eternal lie, and strange aeons, even death may die. I should have known that the Arabs had good reason for shunning the Nameless City. The city told of in strange tales, but seen by no living man, yet I defied them, and went into the untrodden waste with my camel. I alone had seen it, and that is why no other face bears such hideous lines of fear as mine, why no other man shivers so horribly when the night wind rattles the windows. When I came upon it in ghastly stillness of unending sleep, it looked at me, chilly from the rays of cold moon amidst the desert's heat, and as I returned its look, I forgot my triumph at finding it, and stopped still with my camel to wait for the dawn. For hours I waited until east grew gray, and the stars faded, and the gray turned to roseate, a light edge of gold. I heard a moaning and saw a storm of sand stirring among the antique stones, though the sky was clear and the vast reaches of the desert still. Then suddenly above the desert's far rim came the blazing edge of the sun seen through the tiny sandstorm which was passing away, and in my fevered state I fancied that from some remote depth there came a crash of musical metal to hail the fiery disk as Memnon hails it from the banks of the Nile. My ears rang and my imagination seethed as I led my camel slowly across the sand to the unwalkable place, that place which I alone of living men had seen. In and out amongst the shapeless foundations of houses and places I wondered, finding never a carving or inscription to tell of these men, if men they were who built this city and dwelt therein so long ago. The antiquity of the spot was unwholesome, and I longed to encounter some sign or device to prove that the city was indeed fashioned by mankind. There were certain proportions and dimensions in the ruins which I did not like. I had with me many tools and dug much within the walls of the obliterated edifices, but progress was slow and nothing significant was revealed. When night and moon returned, I felt a chill wind which brought new fear, so that I did not dare to remain in the city, and as I went outside the antique walls to sleep, a small sighing sandstorm gathered behind me, blowing over the grey stones, though the moon was rising most of the desert still. I awaked just as dawn from a pageant of horrible dreams, my ears ringing as from some metallic peal. I saw the sun peering readily through the last grass of little sandstone that hovered over the Nameless City and marked the quietness of the rest of the landscape. Once more I ventured within those ruining rooms that swelled beneath the sand like an ogre under a coverlet, and again dug vainly for relics of a forgotten race. At noon I rested, and in the afternoon I spent much time tracing the walls and bygone streets and outlines of nearly vanished buildings. I saw that the city had been mighty indeed, and wondered the sources of its greatness. To myself I pictured all the splendors of an age so distant that Chaldea could not recall it, and thought of Sarnath the doomed that had stood in the land of Menar when mankind was young, and of Ib that was carven and of grey stone before mankind existed. All at once I came upon a place where the bedrock rose stark through the sand and formed a low cliff. Here I saw the joy which seemed to promise further traces of Antediluvian people. Few and rudely on the face of the cliff were the unmistakable facades of several small squat rocks, houses or temples, whose interiors might preserve many secrets of ages too remote for calculation, though sandstones had long since effaced any carvings which may have been outside. Very low, and sand choked were all the dark apertures near me, but I cleared one of my spade, crawled through it carrying a torch to reveal whatever mysteries it might hold. When I was inside, I saw the cavern was indeed a temple, and beheld plain signs of the race that had lived and worshipped before the desert was a desert. Primitive altars, pillars, and niches, all curiously low, were not absent, and though I saw no sculptures or frescoes, there were many singular stones clearly shaped into symbols by artificial means. The lowness of the chiseled chamber was very strange, for I could hardly kneel upright, but the area was so great that my torch showed only part of it at a time. I shuddered oddly in some of the far corners, for certain altars and stones suggested forgotten rites of terrible, revolting, inexplicable nature, and made me wonder what manner of man could have made and fragmented such a temple. When I had seen all the place contained, I crawled out again, and to find out the temple was my deal. Night had now approached, and the tangible things I had seen made curiosity stronger than fear, so that I did not flee from the long moon-cast shadows that daunted me when I first saw the Nameless City. In the twilight I cleared another aperture, and with a new torch crawled into it, finding more vague stones and symbols, though nothing more definite than the other temple had contained. The room was just as low, but much less broad, ending in shrines, a very narrow passage crowded with obscure cryptical shrines. About these shrines I crying when the noise of wind and my camel outside broke through the stillness and drew me forth to see what would have frightened the beast. The moon was gleaming vividly over the primitive ruins, lighting a dense cloud of sand that seemed blown by a strong but decreasing wind from some point along the cliff ahead of me. I knew it was the chilly sandy wind which had disturbed the camel and was about to lead him into a place better shelter, when I chanced to glance up and saw that there was no wind atop the cliff. This astonished me and made me fearful, but I immediately recalled the sudden local winds that I had seen and heard before sunrise, sunset, and judged it was a normal thing. I decided it came from some rock fissure leading to a cave, and watched the troubled sand to trace its source, soon perceiving that it came from the black orifice of a temple a long distance south of me, almost out of sight. Against the choking sand cloud I plodded towards the temple, which I neared it, loomed larger than the rest, and showed a doorway far less clogged with caked sand. I would have entered had not the terrific force of the icy wind almost quenched my torch and poured it madly out of the dark door, sighing uncannily as it ruffled the sand and spread among the weird ruins. Soon it grew fainter, and the sand grew more and more still, so finally all at rest again by the presence that seemed stalking among the spectral stones of the city. And when I glanced at the moon, it seemed to quiver as though mirrored in unquiet waters. I was afraid that I could explain, but not enough to dull my thirst for wonder. So as soon as the wind was quite gone, I crossed into the dark chamber from which it had come. This temple, as I had fancied from the outside, was larger than either of those I had visited before, and was presumably a natural cavern, since it bore winds from some region beyond. Here I could stand quite upright, but saw that the stones and altars were as low as the other temples. On the walls and roof I beheld for the first time some traces of the pictorial art of ancient race, curious growing streaks of paint that had almost faded or crumbled away. And on two of the altars I saw with rising excitement a maze of well-fashioned, curvilinear carvings. As I held my torch aloft, it seemed to me that the shape of the roof was too regular to be natural, and I wondered what prehistoric cutters of stone had first worked upon. Their engineering skill must have been vast. Then a brighter flare of fantastic flame showed that for which I had been seeking, the opening to those remote abysses once the southern wind had blown, and I grew faint when I saw that it had a small and painfully artificial door chiseled in the solid rock. I thrust my torch within, beholding a black tunnel with a roof arching low over a rough flint, a very small, numerous, and steeply descending steeps. I shall always see those steeps in my dreams, for I came to learn what they meant. At that time I hardly knew whether to call them steeps or footholds in the precipitous descents. My mind was whirling with mad thoughts, and the words and warnings of Arab prophets seemed to float across the desert from the lands that men know to this nameless city, and men dare not know. Yet I hesitated only for a moment before advancing but through the fourth one, commencing to climb cautiously down the steep passage. Feet first, as though on a ladder. It is only the terrible phantasms of drugs or delirium that any other man can have such a descent as mine. The narrow passage led infinitely down like some hideous haunted well, and the torch I held above my head could not light the unknown depths towards which I was crawling. I lost track of the hours and forgot to consult my watch, and though I was frightened when I thought of the distance I must be traversing, there were changes of direction and of steepness, and once I came to a long, low, level passage where I had to wriggle my feet first through along the rocky floor, holding torch at arm's length beyond my head. The place was not high enough for kneeling. After that there were more of the steeps, and I was still scrambling down interminably when my failing torch died out. I do not think I noticed it at the time when I did notice it. I was still holding it above me as if it were ablaze. I was quite unbalanced with that instinct, for the strange and unknown which had made me wander upon the earth and haunted of far, ancient, and forbidden places. In the darkness there flashed before my mind fragments of my cherished treasury of demoniac lore, sentences from Al-Hazared, the mad Arab, paragraphs from the apocryphal nightmares of Damascus, and infamous lines from the delirious image of Image du Monde of Gaffir de Metz. I repeated queer extracts and muttered of Afrasiab and Daemons that floated within him down the Oxus, the latter chanting over and over again a phrase from one of the Lord and Messanian's tales, and reverberates the blackness of the abyss. Once when the descent grew amazingly steep, I recited something, a sing-song from the Thomas More, until I feared to recite more. A reservoir of darkness, black as witches' cauldrons are, and filled with moon drugs in the eclipse distilled. Leaning to look at fit might pass, down through that chasm I saw beneath, as far as the vision could explore. The jetty sides as smooth as glass, looking as it just varnished were, with that dark pitch the seat of death, rose out with its slimy shore. Time had ceased to exist when my feet again felt a level floor, and found myself in a place slightly higher than the rooms in the two smaller temples. Now, so incalculably far above my head I could not quite stand, but could kneel upright. In the dark I shuffled the cracks hither and thither at random. I soon knew that I had a narrow passage whose walls were lined with cases of wood having glass fronts, as in a Paleozoic and abysmal place. I felt such things as polished wood and glass. I showed at the possible implications. Their cases apparently ranged along each side of the passage at regular intervals were oblong and horizontal, hastily like coffins in shape and size. When I tried to move 2 or 3 for further examination, I found that they were firmly fastened. I saw the passage was a long one, and so found ahead rapidly. In keeping run, would have seemed horribly had any eye watched me in the blackness, crossing from side to side occasionally to feel my surroundings and be sure of walls and rows of cases so stretched on. Man is used to thinking visually that I almost forgot the darkness and pictured the endless corridor of wood and glass and low-sided monotony as though I saw it. And in a moment of indiscernible emotion I did see it. Just when my fancy emerged into real science I cannot tell, but there came a gradual glow ahead, and all at once I knew that in the dim outlines of the corridor where the cases were filled by unknown subterranean fluorescence for a little while. All was exactly as I had imagined, and since the glow was very faint, that as I mechanically kept stumbling ahead into the stronger light, I realized that my fancy had been feeble. This hall was no relic of frigidity like the temples in the city above, that a monument of the most magnificent and exotic art, rich, vivid, and daringly fantastic designs and pictures formed a continuous scheme of mural painting, whose lines and colors were beyond description. The cases were of strange folding wood, with fronts of exquisite glass, containing the mummified forms of creatures outreaching its grotesqueness of the most chaotic dreams of man. To convey any idea of the monsters is impossible. They were the reptile kind, with body lines suggesting sometimes the crocodile, sometimes the seal, but more often nothing of which either the naturalist or paleontologist ever heard. In size they approximated a small man, and the forelegs more delicate and evident to be curiously like human hands and fingers, but strangest of all were their heads, which presented a contour violating all known biological principles. So nothing can such things be. Well compared in one flash I thought of comparisons as varied as the cat, the bulldog, and the mythic satyr, and the human being, not Jove himself, had so colossal and protuberant a forehead, yet the horns and noselessness and alligator-like jaw placed the things outside all established categories. I debated for the time the reality of mummies, half suspecting they were artificial idols, as soon as decided they were indeed some Paleogene species which had lived when the nameless city was alive. They found their grotesqueness. Most of them were gorgeously enrobed in the costliest of fabrics and lavish, laden with ornaments of gold jewelry and unknown shining metals. The importance of these rolling creatures must have been vast, for they held first place among the wild designs of the frescoed walls and ceiling, with matchless skill and the artists dawned them in a world of their own, wherein they had cities and gardens fashioned to suit the dimensions, and I could not help but think that their patient history was allegorical, perhaps showing the progress of the race they worshipped. Them. These creatures, I said to myself, were to the men of the town city as she-wolf was to Rome, or some totem beast is the tribe of Indians. Holding this, I could trace roughly a wonderful epic of Nameless City, the tale of the mighty seacoast metropolis and the rule of the world before Africa rose out of the waves, and its struggles as the sea shrank away, and the desert crept into the fertile valley that held it. I saw its wars and triumphs, its troubles and defeats, and afterward its terrible fight against the desert and the thousands of its people. Here, represented as allegory by the grotesque reptiles, were driven to the chisel, their way home down through the rocks in some marvelous manner to another world, where their prophet had torn them. It was all vividly weird and realistic, and connected with some awesome sense I had made was unmistakable. I even recognized the passages. As I crept along the corridor towards the brighter light, I saw the later stages of the painted epic, the leaving taken of the race that had dwelt in the nameless city, in the valley around the 10 million years, the race whose souls shrank from quitting scenes their bodies had known so long, where they had settled as nomads in the earth's youth, hewing in the virgin rock of those primal shrines as which they had never ceased to worship. Now that there was life better, I studied the pictures more closely and remembered the strange reptiles must represent the unknown men, pondered upon the customs of the nameless city. Many things are peculiar and inexplicable. The civilization, which included a written alphabet, had seemingly risen to a higher order than those immeasurably later civilizations of Egypt and Chaldea. and yet there were curious omissions. I could, for example, find no pictures representing deaths or funeral customs, save such as were related to wars, violence, and plagues. I wondered had the rest of the sentence shown concerning natural death. It was as though an ideal of immortality had been fostered as a cheering illusion. Still, near the end of the passage was painted scenes of the utmost picturesque gaze and extravagance contrasted the views of the nameless city and its desertion and growing ruin of the strange new realm of paradise to which the race had hewed its way through the stone. And these views of city in the desert valley were shown always by moonlight, golden nimbus hovering over the fallen walls and half revealing the splendid perfection of former times, shown spectrally elusive by the artist. Paradisial scenes were almost too extravagant to be believed, portraying a hidden world of eternal day filled with glorious cities and ethereal hills and valleys. At the very last, I thought of signs of an artistic anticlimax. The paintings were less skillful and much more bizarre, and even the wildest of earlier scenes they seemed to record a slow decadence of the ancient rough stock, compelled, coupled with growing ferocity towards the outside world from which it was driven by the desert. The forms of the people always represented the sacred reptiles appeared to be gradually wasting away, though their spirits, as shown hovering above the ruins by moonlight, gained in proportion. Emancipated priests displayed as reptiles, and ornate robes pierced the upper air and all who breathed it, and one terrible final scene showed a frantic-looking man, perhaps a pioneer of ancient Iran, the city of pillars torn to pieces by members of the elder race. I remember how the Arabs feared the nameless city, and was glad that beyond the place they grew walls and ceilings were there, and I viewed the pageant of moral history. I had approached very closely the end of the low ceiling hall, and was aware of a gate, which hall, the illuminating phosphorescence, creeping up on us. I cried aloud in transcendent amazement at what lay beyond, for instead of other and brighter chambers, I were only an illimitable void of uniform radiance, such as one might fancy when gazing down on the peak of Mount Everest. Upon a sea of sunlit mist behind me was a passage so cramped that I could not stand upright in it. Before me was an infant feet of subterranean effluence. Reaching down the passage into the abyss was a heapless steep of the flight of steps, small numerous steps like those of black passages I had traversed, but after a few feet the glowing vapors concealed everything. Swung back open against the left-hand wall of the passage was a massive door of brass, incredibly thick and decorated with fantastic fast release, which could, if closed, shut the whole inner world of light away from the vaulting passages of rock. I looked at the steps, and from the nonce dared not try them. I touched the open brass door and could not move it. Then I sank from the stone floor. My mind aflame was prodigious reflections which not even a death-like exhaustion could banish. As I lay still with closed eyes, fear-free to ponder many things I had lightly noted in the frescoes, came back to me with new and terrible significant scenes representing the nameless city in that heyday, the vegetation of the valley around it, and the distant lands which the merchants traded, the allegory of the crawling creatures puzzled me by the universal prominence, and I wondered that it would be so closely followed in a pictured history of such importance. In the frescoes, the nameless city had been shown proportions fitted to the reptiles. I wondered what its real proportions and magnificence had been, and reflected a moment on certain oddities I had noticed in the ruins. I thought curiously of the loneliness of the primal temples of the underground corridor, and the doubtless hewn thus unto the deference to the reptile deities there honored through its first reduced the worshippers of the crawling. Perhaps the very rites here involved a crawling and imitation of the creatures. No religious theory, however, could easily explain why the level passages in that awesome descent should be as low as the temples, or lower, since one could not even kneel. And as I thought that the crawling creatures whose hideous mummified forms were so close to me, I felt a new throb of fear. Mental associations are curious, and I shrank from the idea that except for the four currents of man torn to pieces in the last paintings, mine was the only human form amidst the many relics and symbols of primordial life. But as always in the strange roving existence, wonder soon drove out fear for the luminous abyss, and that it might contain presented a problem worthy of the greatest explorer. That a weird world of mystery lay far down the flight of peculiarly small steps. I could not doubt, and I hoped to find there those human memorials which his painted corridor had failed to give. The frescoes had pictured unbelievable cities and valley and a lower ground, and fancied dwelt on the rich and colossal ruins that awaited me. My fears indeed concerned the past rather than the future, not even the physical horror of my position as that cramped corridor of dead reptiles and antediluvian frescoes. Miles below the world I knew and faced by another world of eerie light and mist. When I shall lethal dread as I felt the abysmal antiquity of the scene amidst its soul, and the ancientness so vast and measurements so feeble, he seemed to lead down from the primal stones and rocky temples of the nameless city, while the very latest of the astounding maps in the frescoes shoot oceans and continents that man has forgotten, with only here and there some vaguely familiar outline of what could have happened in the geological ages since the paintings ceased and the death-hating race resentfully succumbed to decay. No man might say, life had once teemed in these caverns and the luminous realms beyond. Now I saw alone with vivid relics, and I trembled to think of the countless ages through which the relics had kept a silent, deserted vigil. Suddenly there came another burst of acute fear, which had intermittently seized me ever since I first saw the terrible valley and the nameless city under a cold moon. And despite my exhaustion, I found myself starting frantically to a sitting posture, gazing back along the black corridor towards the tunnels that rose to the outer world. My sensations were like those which had made me shun the nameless city at night, and were inexplicable as they were pointing. In another moment, however, I received a still greater shock in the form of a deafening sound, the first which had spoken the utter silence of the tomb like depths. It was deep, a low moaning of a distant throng of condemned spirits, and came from the direction in which I was staring. Its volume rapidly grew till it soon reverberated frightfully through the low passage, and at the same time I became conscious of the increasing drop of cold air, likewise flowing from the tunnels in the city above. The touch of this air seemed to restore my balance, for I instantly recalled the sudden gusts which had risen around the mouth of the abyss each sunset and sunrise. One of them had indeed revealed the hidden tunnels to me. I looked at my watch and saw the sunrise was near, so braced myself to resist the gale that was sweeping down to the cavern home had swept forward. And as evening, for my fear, gained waned low, since the natural phenomenon tensed its spell, broodings over the unknown. More and more madly poured the shrieking, moaning night, and went into the gulf of the inner earth. I dropped prone again and clutched vainly at the floor, for fear of being swept boldly through the open gate to the phosphorescent abyss. Such fury I had not expected, and I grew aware of the actual slipping of my form towards the abyss. I was beset by thousands of new terrors of apprehension and imagination, and that brilliancy of the blast awakened incredible fancies. Once more I compared myself suddenly to the only human imagine in that frightful corridor, the man who was torn to pieces by the nameless race with the fingers clawing the swirling currents that seemed to the vindictive rage all the stronger because of the largely impotent. I think I screamed frantically near the last. I was almost mad, but I did so. My cries were lost in the hellborn babble of the howling wind waves. I tried to crawl against the murderous invisible torrents, but I could not even hold my own as I pushed slowly and inexorably toward the unknown world. Finally, reason must have wholly snapped, for I fell to babbling over and over that inexplainable couplet of the mad Arab Halazahared, who dreamed of the nameless city that is not dead, which came eternal lie. And with strange aeons, even death may die. Only the grim, brooding, deserted gods know that what really took place. What indescribable struggles and scrambles in the dark under, or what Abaddon guided me back to life, where I must always remember the shiver in the night, when until oblivion or worse claims me. Monstrous, unnatural, colossal was the thing, too far beyond all the ideas of man to be believed, except in the silent animal small hours of the morning, when we cannot sleep. I have said that the fear of the Russian class was infernal, cacadae, mononical, and that his voices were hideous with the pent-up viciousness of the desolate eternities. Presently these voices, while still chaotic before me, seemed to be a beating brain to take particular form behind me, and down in the grave, unnumbered, beyond dead antiquities, leagues below the dawnlit world of men. I heard the ghastly cursing and awing strangeness of tongues, turning my star line against the luminous aether of the abyss that I could not be seen against the dusk of the corridor, and nightmare horde of Russian devils, hasty sword-forwarded, grotesquely penible hide, half-transparent devils of a race of no man might mistake, the crawling reptiles of the nameless city. And as the wind died away, I was plunged into the cool darkness of the earth's bellows, where behind the last of the creature, the great brazen door, fanged shut, with a deafening peal of metallic music, whose reverberations swelled out to the distant world, hailed the rising sun of Memnon, hails it from the banks of the Nile.